Hi everyone and welcome back to another card making video. For this card I used the new tiny gift box skunk add-on from Lawn Fawn to create a squirrel. The skunk you can make with the set is super adorable, but when I got my hands on the set I immediately saw a squirrel too. The Acorn House from Lawn Fawn is a match made in heaven for the squirrel, so that's what I used for this fun Valentine's card. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Spreek je Nederlands? Er is ondertiteling beschikbaar. I got all the different bits and pieces for the squirrel out of different colored cardstock. I cut the body out of black too, so I have the eyes, nose and mouth to pop in the openings. You can also use the sort of oval shaped piece to put a black piece of cardstock behind the body, but I like to fill in the spaces for this one. You can keep the pieces plain or add some dimension by lightly ink blending the edges. That's what I went for. For the body and tail I went with Distress Oxide Ground Espresso. With a blending brush you have a lot of control and don't add too much ink at once. I do the white of the tail with Distress Oxide Antique Linen. Next up is gluing all the pieces together to create the squirrel. After I glue on the pieces for the inside of the ears, I put a piece of scotch tape to the back so I can pop in the eyes, nose and mouth easily in the front. By the way, if you like my videos, you can support my channel by subscribing. It's totally free to do so. If you already are a subscriber, thank you! Because the squirrel is going to be in an angle on the giant acorn, the adhering of the tail might look a bit weird, but it makes sense when you see it on the acorn. I cut the pieces for the acorn with the Acorn House set from Lawn Fawn. First I'm going to blend on some Distress Oxide Vintage Photo on the base. I check with the hood if I blended it far enough and I decide to adjust it a little. My darkest brown Distress Oxide color becomes a bit chalky on dark brown paper, so I use Memento Rich Cocoa for this. It is a little bit harder to blend it on, but I just take it easy and layer it a bit till I'm happy with the result. Off screen I'm splattering these paints on the base of the acorn to add a little more interest. Next up is gluing the hood in place. With the largest die from the large stitched rectangle stackables from Lawn Fawn, I cut a piece of white cardstock suitable for ink blending and half a piece of green cardstock. With the grass die of the mushroom border die set I'm going to cut that green cardstock later on. Now for the background I'm doing some ink blending with Distress Oxides. I use the colors Picked Raspberry and Victorian Velvet. I start out with Victorian Velvet. I don't blend all the way down because that will be covered with the grass later on. For the area I do want to ink blend, I do about half with both colors. I switch back and forth between the colors till I'm happy with the gradient. I use my Distress sprayer to add some drops of water to the background. The water reacts with the ink. I dab off the excess with a paper towel. I use some purple tape at the bottom part to keep my background in place for the next step, which is stenciling. I use the Lots of Hearts background stencils from Lawn Fawn. I align the stencil to my liking and then tape it down with some purple tape also. The first stencil I'm fully doing with Picked Raspberry as well. I carefully remove the stencil when I'm done and I lay down the second stencil. I'm taping it down as well. This stencil I'm going to blend with Memento Luxe Wedding Dress. I'm making sure I use a super clean blending brush so I don't mess up my ink pad. When I'm done, I remove the stencil and the paper from my work surface and set it aside to dry. The white is very smudge sensitive for a while. Like I said before, I cut the green cardstock with the grass die from the mushroom border set. I want a little more dimension, so I'm going to do some ink blending. I start out with Distress Oxide Mauve Lawn. Next, I very lightly go in with Rustic Wilderness. To finish it off, I'm making splatters with these two paints. With the Oliver stitched ABCs, I cut the letters for the word nuts out of colored cardstock. With Distress Oxide Aged Mahogany, I'm going to lightly blend on a gradient using a blending brush. I cut a strip of black cardstock and I'm dusting this with baby powder to make it anti-static. I put the strip into my MISTI and I position the stamps for you and I'm on each end. I stamp them with clear embossing ink. Next, I sprinkle on some white embossing powder. I melt the powder with a preheated heat gun so it goes quick and easy. With a very slightly moist chamois, I wipe off the excess baby powder. Off screen, I cut the strips to the right size. Now for assembling, I first lay down a few things to find the right position for the acorn. With one of the Sandy Beach accents dies, I'm going to cut a slit to hide the flat bottom of the acorn. For assembling, I put the acorn in place first. When I'm happy with the position, I put some glue on the back to adhere it in place. I can now adhere the whole thing to the background. Next up is gluing the squirrel in place. I do so by adding just a little bit of glue so he isn't going to get any creases from pressing it down. Now I can glue the sentiment banner on the right first. I can now lay down the rest first till I'm happy with the placement. Now I glue everything down. I prepare the craft paper card base and I check if the size is correct. Then I use my ATG gun to adhere the card front onto the card base. And with that, my card is finished. When I have to put myself into a category, I would say I'm a stamper. But I do enjoy die cutting more and more. I'm very happy how this card turned out. I love to stretch my supplies, and this squirrel is a great way to use the skunk set in a different way. Also, the Acorn House gets a really good other use now too. I hope you enjoyed watching me make this card and that it inspired you to get crafty yourself. If so, please consider leaving a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel and ringing the bell to receive a notification when a new video is up. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye!